You are now listening to FNB Radio.
Welcome to FNB Radio. My name is Lindsay Collins, and I am your host. I'm not even going to do any sort of intro. I'm just going to get right into it because my guest is sort of a legend in his own right, Fletcher Williams III. Yeah, welcome to the show.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, that non-introduction introduction
I just
of the legendary.
Yeah, you know, it's everybody already knows, and we're going to talk about this because there is like a dichotomy of, I think, how you're known to me. I knew about your work before I moved back here, and I feel like you exist on a global level that's like way bigger than what maybe Charleston even recognizes you, but also the people in Charleston, especially in the artist community, know you and are like obsessed with you and think that you're an amazing artist, and I'm right there with them. And I'm so happy to have you on the show.
I'm glad to be here. And it's funny, you have to tell me how you came across my work or where that happened. But
yeah, I
will say that I'm excited. I feel like I'm now creating that artist. Well, I'm not the one creating it, and despite some of the things we've talked about already, but that community, I feel like it's regenerating. Yeah. In a sense, I mean, definitely. Just meeting Germany. Germany. Yeah. Laura Croft, Germany. Just some really cool people. So I'm excited about what's happening here. I'm glad to be, kind of one of the people contributing to that. So, and now this. So.
Now this. Yeah. It's not like you don't have your own solo exhibition in the International African American Museum that's currently open that I have gushed about on this show before because, and we're going to get into that. I want to like give the listener at home, if they aren't familiar with your work and you, I like struggled with this because I was like, I don't know which thing I'm most interested to talk to him about. There's so many different elements. But I think one of the things that struck me was I feel like you are a bit of a mysterious character in this world, or maybe just mysterious to me. But I want to know kind of about your life and kind of give them the intro before we get into your work, what you're doing now, how you became the artist that you are. But I have a lot of questions just about your life and kind of what you were like as a child and how you came to art and what stage in your life. You don't have to like take it back to being a baby, but you can.
I mean, we can start in this neighborhood.
Oh, really?
Which is pretty interesting. I mean, I grew up down not too far away, maybe 10 minutes behind Goodwin Elementary, where that crosswalk is.
Oh, cool.
So that's, so I moved there when I was 9. That was my mom's first house. Goodwin. So I had a really good art teacher at Goodwin Elementary. And so all through elementary through 5th, I was working at it. I'd be that kid in class who's like drawing Tasmanian Devil from memory, that kind of thing. But I guess she recognized something then. I also had family who was also recognized my interest in the arts too. But they would give you that crown, that like 100-piece art set. Yeah. Kind of for Christmas. It had the watercolor palette and the 2-inch colored pencils, that kind of thing. My uncles were, scratching records in the garage. Color pencil drawings, graffiti. But so anyway, and that family's in Somerville. I grew up not too far from here on Dorchester Road. I guess seemingly good arts program at Goodwin Elementary, and then I also did the space program, the summer arts program. So I was doing that, during the summer.
So you already knew, you were like, that was just something, that's what you like to do with your time. And
I spent a lot of time by myself making art. My mom, like, one of the stories she always tells, when she meets someone, he's talented. I knew from a very young age when I came back home and, he made orange. I was like, how'd you make that? And I was like, I mixed those colors to get this. So it was a lot. I've been doing this for a long time. And I think a lot of people recognized it in me at a very early age. And so that was nurtured, through elementary school. And then I was encouraged to apply to School of the Arts.
Okay, so like after high school, or did you do art?
No. This was all throughout.
Oh wow!
So that was 6th grade.
Oh man!
Which actually I didn't get into the School of the Arts in 6th grade. A good buddy of mine, William, who's now a barber, so his talents are in a different space. But he got into School of the Arts in 6th grade, and I had to go to Brentwood Middle School. Oh, no. Which is, if I don't know, are you?
I'm not. No, I didn't grow up here, but my parents are met here. They're military And so they met here in high school. And I know the area from living back here. And I went to college at Charleston briefly. But so I've had like kind of in and out of Charleston, but I'm not from here proper.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I mean.
But I know how it feels to not get into the art school. I was a piano player, and I was trying to get into the Governor's School of the Arts and got rejected and was like, saw other people go, and I was like, fuck, I blew it. And it's not how it goes, but it feels like that at the time when you want to go.
Oh, right. It was devastating. I'm like, oh, shit. And then I have to go to this badass fucking middle school where there are like fights every day and like,
oh, really?
The teacher's writing shorthand when they're correcting papers. I'm almost like, okay, you need to apply again. Like, you're going to School of the Arts. If there's anything I could do about it, you're going to School of the Arts. So I did reapply, and so in 7th grade, I was accepted, and so that's when I, stepped into a school that was, specific to the arts. I had art every day for an hour. We had exploratories, so I also played the clarinet in 6th grade.
Oh,
which,
cool.
I mean, nothing I'd brag about, but I have friends who are incredibly talented now who do that full time. But I mean, to go to School of the Arts in a place where you're introduced to every kind of socioeconomic background, race, religion, from all over the county, truly. I mean, friends in McClellanville, Johns Island, North Charleston, that was a rare opportunity in a rare environment, and that really exposed me to, different ways of living, different cultures, and art was absolutely that leveled the playing field, and we all celebrated each other in that environment, which was pretty cool. We didn't get the typical kind of traditional high school experience where you have the hierarchy of the jocks and the nerds and the cool kids and the art kids and so that was great. But the reason I brought up the neighborhood was that I played baseball all throughout school.
Oh my God, what can't you do? You like do it all. That's amazing.
No, we're all like, oh yeah, I was the best. I was badass in baseball.
When no one can fact check that in any way.
Right. Yeah, there's no record of that. No videos, no iPhone videos. But yeah, I did play small fry, which is weird though. I was talking to someone about this the other day, like Dixie Youth baseball.
Why is it called that?
I should have looked this up before, but it definitely has some. I mean,
it was
you're right. Yeah. Obviously, whites only league. Dixie Youth, Dixie Boys. There were other leagues that were. I mean, there was what's the story of the YMCA? That baseball team that wasn't allowed to compete or play in the state championship. But there's a whole story about that, so I'm not going to get in because I don't know the facts of that. But yeah, I'm like, no one questioned this then when we were playing. I mean, we didn't think anything of it. We didn't know. I mean, I had friends. I can think of a friend right now who had a giant Confederate flag in the back window of her Jeep going to school, and it was. I guess those weren't concerns of mine then, but.
Isn't that interesting, though? Because it's obviously not that long ago. I think we're around the same age. You're 87, I'm 86, but I was not years old. That's when we were born. I'm 104, you're 103. But I have a similar upbringing I was like, I just don't remember recognizing that as like a problem. And then now it's like almost like I can't even look at that kind of stuff without having a visceral reaction. So I'm like, when did that come online for me? Because it's just when you're raised in I'm from Williston, South Carolina. So it's a small southern town near Aiken and very backwoods type of small community stuff. So we definitely had Dixie Youth. I wasn't into sport. I couldn't even run without falling down, so I wasn't into sports. But I do have pictures being in it, and I remember it being called Dixie Youth, and I was like, never occurred to me.
Yeah.
And now it's like, now that you say that, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, never occurred to me. I mean, there was like a 8-foot Confederate flag that drove down my street the other day, and I just was just so disgusted, and just you do have that visceral reaction. You're like kind of enraged. You're like, why do I have to encounter this? But then, in school, it wasn't an issue. I mean, she was a good friend of mine, too. So maybe it was the environment. Maybe if I went to a school where you can see those groups of people, like there's a kind of a stark separation, in groups. But
or things that just get handed down. Like kids, I feel like in high school, you're just you're trying to find your own way, but you're definitely still just absorbing whatever your parents are
absolutely.
passing down to you. So it's so weird when you're like a kid, like trying on stuff like, yeah, this is who I am. And then later you're like, oh, fuck, that was, I hope that's not who I am, you know?
I had a pair of Jinko jeans.
I'm basically wearing Jinkos right now.
Are they back? Are they back?
I think they're back.
I think they're back.
I don't know.
But,
I'm not a trendsetter. I think they're back.
Yeah, so I mean, it was like you said. I don't know what her relationship was with that flag then, but it definitely didn't affect our friendship at all.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, that kind of like school experience, I think, is really rare because I feel like I was homeschooled, so I'm like an outlier. But
Okay.
Jeremy and I were talking about this, and he was saying that he had a really good art teacher in elementary school, and then around middle school, all that got cut. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I think in high school art came back. But it was like, that's kind of the most important time for someone to really see and absorb art as a means. And we talk about this a lot in this house because I'm like, we're always trying to establish and like not push our kids to do art because I just want them to do whatever they want to do. But I want to make it clear that art is a viable way, you know, or pursuing something creative. I think in a lot of places, especially in like smaller towns where we grew up, those are just kind of like, no one was really saying that as an option or saying, or even giving it any merit, just kind of being like, that's something that you like check a box in elementary school and you're done. You've learned.
That's cute. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And not like this is, and I think a lot of creatives feel kind of isolated by that because they're like, well, I just could never figure out when my guidance counselor would be like, what do you want to do? You know, I had music. And so that was sort of a separate thing for me, but I'm like, it's cool that you got the opportunity. And it makes sense when you look at the depth and the breadth of your work that you've been in it and like pursuing it in a serious way for a long time.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, going to school, you also had students, like friends whose art programs were, you know, they were cutting those budgets.
Yeah.
So for me to be able to go every day for an hour and study art, practice art, see friends doing their art, hear musicians playing down the hallway, singers walk past another room and, you know, they're practicing ballet. And some of those friends are, I mean, a lot of them are still pursuing the arts, in the arts. But
what did your artwork look like back then? Well, did you have a medium that you stayed in?
I did a lot of painting, actually.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of oil painting, which,
cool.
Well, watercolor and oil painting. But yeah, you know, the typical kind of emo portrait, that kind of thing. Three-quarter view, yeah, kind of just staring at yourself, which most of them are always exercises, some landscape painting. But again, in school, you're just, you know, learning, studying masterworks, that kind of thing. But I didn't do much three-dimensional work until college.
Cool.
And even that was a bit challenging because, again, being in South Carolina, you're not exposed to a lot of, I guess we can say, cutting-edge contemporary work. It's all very traditional. A lot of landscape painting, some old portraiture, that kind of thing. So I'm like, I don't know what the parameters of art. I mean, I guess mine were pretty rigid, strict, narrow in terms of what art could be.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Cooper in New York...
how did you get there? How did you choose that?
Well, the funny thing is, so I applied to several art schools out of when I was graduating. I got accepted to a couple, like my ideal schools, like Atlanta College of Art, Maryland Institute College of Art. But of course, those tuitions are astronomical. So I had to sit back a little while. So I did tech I did cross-register between tech and College of Charleston. Tech, I did all my graphic design work. And then College of Charleston did the traditional painting and drawing. So while I was there, my professor at Tech, he was like, hey, Fletcher, there's a school in New York. They offer full tuition to everyone accepted. I was like, wow, okay, no reason not to apply there. Yeah. So actually, I was dating someone who was going to FIT at the time. So I've been going to New York, like here and there. So I was familiar with it, comfortable with New York City. And so I went to Cooper Union for just like one of those portfolio visits. And I met a few of the professors, and they encouraged me to apply early. And so
this is before your...
this was my second year. So I graduated in 2005. This was 2007 that I was applying. Or that fall, that winter, early 2007. So yeah, I was already in New York. I did the early admission kind of portfolio review. I applied, and that was a heck of a application process. I mean, written prompts, visual prompts, like a portfolio of like 30 to 40 works.
Oh my God. Like who out of high school already has, I mean, I guess if you went to art school, but I'm like 30 to 40 works,
still,
that's a lot.
There's some people who don't even finish the application. So I mean,
Sure.
that cuts the pool.
I already want to stop just hearing about it.
Yeah, no, that cut the pool right there. So, yeah, I applied, and of course, everyone's like, "Yeah, you get accepted. You get this like thick packet of like all this information." I get this small envelope. I was like,
"Oh no,
fuck, man, I don't think this is going well for me." So I opened it, and to my surprise, it was an acceptance letter.
They're like, "We already used all that paper for the application part. We can't use it anymore.
Right,
it's just you're in. You can come."
It was an amazing moment.
Oh my God, that's so exciting!
I couldn't believe it. I was so excited. It was my golden ticket out of Charleston. So yeah, then that summer I took off to New York, and totally different world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was in the heart of Manhattan, LES. I mean, right there on St. Mark's and 3rd Avenue. And it was head first. I mean, now I'm at another school with some of the most talented people I ever met in my life. And I mean, it was a school for architecture, a school for engineering, and then art. And we didn't declare a major. So you kind of like steered yourself through the program.
I love that.
Yeah, with some guidance from the professors, of course, and then there was independent study. But you kind of find your lane when you realize there are people who are stronger in other areas.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I think I'm stronger in here. So they're great at film photography, so I'm gonna stay in my lane, that kind of thing. But it was super experimental, very conceptual, and there was no formal training in terms of teaching you how to, use software or how to draw, what tools you use. It was a matter of like, we're gonna teach you how to think and challenge yourself.
I love this because I feel like that is my not fear, but that's like my one critique I have of art school is like if you're teaching someone how to do art, or the process is like you kind of eliminate the ability to come to the conclusions on your own or to establish your own identity as an artist.
Yeah, and I think hindsight, that's what they were doing. It was very frustrating at times, and also I mean
just because you couldn't, they were like, no. What was frustrating about it?
I mean, just to give you a specific example, I mean, at times we were, like, say you had a painting critique. I mean, there were things that, for me at once, I didn't consider to be a painting that were brought into sculpture, and things that I thought were specifically paintings brought into, painting into sculpture and sculpture into painting.
Oh.
I was like, we're going to talk.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to talk about this in the same way we would talk about a painting. And so all of those lines, so it was pretty much me just dismantling every preconceived notion I had about what art could be.
Wow.
And so it was challenging, but it was refreshing, and I got the hang of it like towards the end of my time at Cooper. But
what do critiques look like in that situation? Like you put in a paint. I've never sat in on anything like this, and I think this is something that artists don't really do enough. Are you supposed to do that after school?
I feel like you should, and I miss it. I miss that. I miss that feedback. I miss kind of. Not to like, it's constructive, obviously, but like it's nice to sit down with anyone, not even just, not even artists, and talk about the work, talk about the intentions, and just get people's response. And I think that's what I'm missing here in Charleston too, which I'm excited.
I was gonna say, I feel like in Charleston, and it's such a supportive, like very, very cool, like friendly community, but I feel like you got a lot of like, love it, looking great, and it's just like that doesn't like I
that
feel
doesn't help me.
Right.
Yeah,
I feel like a lot of artists, and myself included, though, I feel like it's hard to speak to someone about their work, or you feel like they don't want that. In reality, if you talk to most artists that I talk to are like, I'd rather someone say something bad about it than just say nothing.
I'm
or
like,
just
please say you hate it.
Yeah.
Something.
So, like, and have a reason why, or like have it be constructive, or like say something about it other than just like looking good. Like that is so unhelpful for someone. It's like just kind of, it's like being in the dark.
Yeah.
And I
think a lot of us feel very siloed in that way. I mean, there's like, where's that discourse happening? And yeah, so
behind the scenes when no one, not to the artist's face. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
'Cause
look
somebody's
yourself,
saying something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
I'm like, is this work successful in those ways, or do y'all really like? Are you just trying to make me feel good? I mean,
Are you just scared to say something?
Yeah.
Like because I don't know.
And also, I'm like, oh, are they like, this is a heavy topic. He's a black artist. Are we allowed to critique it? I mean, is this bigger
That's
than the art
interesting.
itself? And so I worry about that sometimes being an artist in Charleston. But so before we get ahead, the critiques at Cooper, I mean, we're talking like 3-4 hour critiques where it's
Whoa.
just not, it's sometimes it does focus on a few artists, you know, sometimes everyone brings in a piece, that kind of thing. But yeah, no, we really, including the professor, really dug into the work, the process. And then, you know, some people had to go back to the drawing board and just kind of toss that thing after the critiques.
Did you ever see people just fall apart in these, like, I mean, that's got to be so painful as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you're putting your life on the, and not life on the line. You're kind of opening a page of your diary.
Emotionally,
Yeah, emotionally, yeah. Like, okay, here's all of me just splayed out right here. So let's all like dig into it, and like,
Yeah,
everyone has an opinion on it. But again, it was very constructive, and you know, people talk about your technique or the symbolism in the work, or just any other aesthetic quality or its relationship to art history. There's so many different ways to approach it, but I think we were trying to get the main goal was to produce the best art we could.
Yeah.
But there were, like, you started to recognize some schools of thought per se within Cooper. Some were just very steadfast and like, you know, this is the kind of work I make. I just want to refine this thing. Others were like super experimental and wanting to kind of push the canon a bit because they saw, I think a lot of people recognized, which kind of sounds a little weird, a little egotistical, but like the significance of their work in relation to like the larger canon. Because, I mean, we're surrounded by some of the top galleries in the world. I mean, we had the privilege to walk down the street and go to the Met or the MoMA. So I'm like,
yeah,
the bar was super high. I mean, we were exposed to so much, and we all wanted to be in those spaces. So it was like, what kind of work? How hard do we have to work to be in those spaces, to be recognized by the same people that see value in those artworks in those museums? And so that was it was a great experience, and just being in New York alone was phenomenal. I mean, my first week, I was doing shit that I probably would have never done in Charleston. It was a wild group of people, wild group of artists.
Yeah.
I mean, you bring in the most eccentric artists from all over the world into one. I mean, there were only 60 artists admitted. There are only 60 artists admitted each year into the program. Yeah, so it was super competitive. And then like 30 architects, maybe like 200 engineers or something like that. So yeah, it was a great environment, great people. I keep in touch with several, and a lot of them are doing phenomenal things in their careers. I mean, one of them was a director of like a Marvel movie, Superwoman or something like that. Yeah, so
it's wild though when you bring that many people together. Like when you're pulling just a few, you know, when they're so like that is they've got to be some of the most, like you're saying, eccentric, like the top of their kind of fields and pushing the boundaries in terms of what they're doing. And so you can't help but be influenced and like made better by that in that environment. Like that's such a unique. I didn't realize it was that few artists. Like that's wild.
Yeah, you know, it's crazy. I mean, it's up there. I feel like I keep throwing out things like, yeah, I'm perfect, I'm great. But like,
no,
they, like the admissions, the acceptance rate is up there with like Yale. So I mean, it's pretty intense, and a lot of the graduates of Cooper, that's kind of a feeder program for Yale's MFA program. I didn't go to grad school because a lot of people know or recognize Cooper to be as rigorous as some MFA programs.
Wow.
So I feel like I thought for me personally, I got what I needed from the undergraduate program. But a lot of people did benefit from going to an MFA program because that just opens you up to a humongous network of galleries and curators and things like that. But I had people at Cooper, like professors, who were like, if you came into this industry to make money, you came into the wrong field. Wow. So they're definitely like, if you're in this for the art, you came to the right place. But let me remind you how difficult it is.
That's something I really, really, really want to talk about because I feel like there's so much, especially with our generation, like now in like this time in our generation, because I feel like for a while it was just like, do you want to be a vet or do you want to be a doctor or a lawyer? Like there was no creativity. And then now I feel like in our late 30s where we are, suddenly everyone's a creative. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I mean that in like people are finally trying to find their thing. And it can feel very seductive or like sexy to be an artist. Yeah. And the reality is, and this is again, I'm a performer, a writer. Like I'm not in visual arts in any capacity, but watching Jeremy, I'm like, it's an extremely hard field. And there's like way more reasons not to do it than there is to do it, really, if you think about it, unless you're one of the people who truly doesn't know what else they could do. Like it feels so ingrained in your personality and your existence.
Oh, absolutely. It is my being.
Yeah.
Like despite it not, like it's not glamorous, probably 90% of the time. I mean, yeah, the openings and all exhibitions are great. I mean, it's nice to meet collectors and sell work to collectors and that kind of thing. But
just like high highs, but there's a lot of like,
oh my God, this is the most volatile like career. I mean, the art in general. And so, yeah, I'm like, if I didn't, I thought of like singers the other day. You hear about so many singers who make music through breakups. I'm like, if they didn't make music through those moments, they probably wouldn't have half of the albums they have. I mean, because you are compelled to respond, to create, to encapsulate, to represent those moments, every moment. So nothing is excluded. Yeah. And I don't know what else to be at this. There is no other option. I mean, like I said,
you feel that when you're around you, and when I'm talking to you now, and just anytime I've been around you, you feel that, and I feel like that's a rare thing, because it does seem like I don't want to say this, and this isn't directed at anyone, of course, but I just mean like I think it's now become a way to seem like you could just make something and sell it. And like that's like an idea that floats around, that it's like, I could quit my real job and just do this and sell it.
Right.
And I just, from someone who lives with someone who's like trying to pursue something creative, I'm like, it's really not that should never be your motivation. And I love that your professor told you that, because I think that's some like very real advice.
Oh, it's very real advice. I mean, and the transaction is the last part. It's not even a part of the process when making work. I mean, it's just a...
Do you think art is bad if it doesn't sell? Your particular art? Do you feel like if it... does all your work sell? Probably. You're just...
I mean, no, and it's taken a long time for some of the works to sell. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad or unsuccessful piece. I just don't think the right person has found it.
I love that.
I mean, and I've had works that I've created maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and someone looks at it like, that's the one I want. I'm like, okay. And the thing is, I've had, in terms of the business side, people make offers for things. I'm like, sometimes I don't even think they're the best person to own that work. Wow. And it's taken a long time to get to that point where I'm telling someone that, no, thank you. I want to wait, because this piece is very precious. And I want to find the right place. I want to find the right institution. So
that's a fascinating way to look at it, because I think a lot of people that are making work, like, it's hard to separate, like, if someone doesn't like this, does it mean it's good or bad? Is it a negative or a positive? Did I do a good job? And you're constantly evaluating yourself and your work and how you feel about the work. And it's hard not to tie that to the transaction. Yeah. But this is an excellent way to think about it.
No, it does chip away at your ego and your pride. Yeah. And your confidence when making work. Sometimes you're like, it's not being received as well as I thought it would be. I thought this was this was a profound moment for me. So what's happening here? But
having saying, I want to find the right person to own it. Like that is, I think that's a brilliant process to think about.
And even, what's his name? Rashid Johnson, I think it was. He, very prolific, successful artist. He said, say yes until you can say no. And so I feel like I'm kind of I'm in nowhere near the league he's in, but I think we're all working to a point where we can control absolutely everything about our work and the creative process. Because, there are constantly people, like we talked about earlier. I mean, people want to buy the work, or people who think they're offering you an opportunity that's great for you, that'll get you ahead. But I'm like, a lot of those things aren't quote unquote opportunities. I think they're setting themselves up for an advantage to benefit from the work that they don't see on the back end. and, you know, pushing your work ahead, being a collector, that kind of thing. But there's, I mean, I didn't quite say that concisely, but I think it just comes down to protecting your work. Ultimately,
Yes.
is what I'm saying.
Yes. Yes,
and-
because that is the thing that there's so many, like I said, so many things I want to talk to you about, but I love following you on social media because you will occasionally just like put an idea up into a story or like a thought that you're having.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that they're unpopular opinions, but they're kind of like make people think. They're very provocative in terms of what, like, think about this, or something somebody else might not be brave enough to say this.
Right.
And it's sort of what you're like amazing at, because you do it so beautifully, and it's never it's never a hot take. And that's what I appreciate, even though it is a very astute take on what's happening in the industry. And you did one recently, it's been a few months now, but about curators, curation, the effect that it has on artists. And I was curious, maybe, I don't know if you want to get into what prompted that idea or what the response was, because my favorite part of that whole set of slides on social media was at the end. It was like a lot of the curators were real quiet right now. And there was just like no one, maybe people didn't know what to say to that.
A lot of people, there were a couple curators and friends who reached out, and they're like, yeah, Fletcher, I understand the argument, but we're not all bad. And like you said, it wasn't a personal attack, but there were some things that did prompt that that post, and I do think the thing is that I want artists to give themselves is the permission to kind of challenge the system and know that make it known that they're protecting their work, that they value their work. Because I think, like I was just saying before, I think there's the misconception that artists always need like some weird kind of financial support that's more exploitative than supportive.
Yeah.
And that's just not the case. And that, artists can be their own curators. Artists can be their own gallerists. They can be, self-employed. They can manage and produce their own exhibitions, that kind of thing. And that's what I've been doing the past few years in Charleston, because I haven't gotten the support I felt like I needed to get my work where it is now. But in terms of like the curatorial process, I mean, I'm the one living with my work every day. And so if you step into my space, my world, my whatever, and you want to create an exhibition with my work, I think it's imperative that we build some kind of rapport. I don't know how, it doesn't matter how long or like whatever amount of time that takes, it's fine. But it's important that there's some like real meaningful engagement, because if you're going to speak for me, if you're going to speak for my work, you need to know me in and out, like the most intimate things, like, know my personality, know my character, know, the trajectory. I can't get that. Just the history. And so I don't think a lot of curators are doing that, because just like there are a bunch of artists now, there are also a bunch of curators.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I do challenge curators. I do challenge the gallery system or the museum system, because I do think artists are the ones keeping these institutions afloat.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And I think what's lost in that exchange, like when curators are just looking, it's a visual medium, right? So you're looking at something, they're seeing, I don't care what their purpose is, in some way it comes back to finances and money, or they wouldn't be interested in it. You know what I mean? No one's interested in it altruistically.
Right.
Even if there is some part of them that is interested or cares about art, or is like the art speaks to them. I'm not saying that can't also coexist, but at the end of the day, like there's some relationship that goes back to, can they sell this? And they will take things out of context, or just be like, this person's hot right now, so we want to feature them, rather than understanding and like deeply knowing the art. And that does take a relationship. That can't just be like well, you're doing cool things now, so like maybe we should have you and feature your work, and we'll just use this one, regardless of if it's part of a body of work or what that work means to you, or why you even made the work in the first place.
Oh yeah, and a lot of art curators will come in and pick up work and not know the full story, not understand the significance of it. I'm like, how do you then place my work in a group exhibition out of context? I've had that happen to my work too.
Wow.
And then the work just kind of sits there silently, because it doesn't have that, that framework within the group exhibition to like activate everyone's piece equally and significantly. And so there's another instance where like you can say like, no, I don't think that's the right context or exhibition for my work. I mean, if you want to come back to the drawing board and tell me how you can better display it, then maybe we can reconsider. But I've had my work end up in exhibitions that just, it's like they didn't even happen.
Wow.
There's no good documentation. There's no like great curatorial statement framework for it to support it. It's not seen by the right people. And you put all that, you invest all that time, you give them the work, you know, they ship the work, someone's holding the work, it's consigned after the exhibition. 3 months later, you get it back, and you probably miss some opportunities to sell it to someone who actually cared and was truly interested in the work. Yeah, I don't know where we got off on that.
Well, there's a similar thing that happens in it's not on the same level, but in food and beverage, where wine, for instance, like wine technically has no inherent value. It does, and there's a market value for it.
Yeah.
And there's a slight, you know, there's ones that are made more nobly than others, and all of these things. But without the talking points that are real, there's people that are actually making this wine that's really hard to make and really hard to deal with, and you're like, and unless you have a story, and I don't mean like a fairy tale that's going to move someone to buy it, but I mean like you need to actually know the facts. It takes work to sell something and understand something and like know the people's names who made it and where the grapes are grown or whatever it is.
Right,
but I'm like,
right.
I've seen people just try to sell expensive bottles of wine. And I'm like, there's no deftness if you're just trying to be like, what's the most money I can get out of this person? It's more like, who is this person?
Yeah.
What are they here to experience?
Right.
And what is the right bottle for them, regardless of where we are or how it's made or where it's from or anything like that. Like you don't just go into something like, here's a cool thing. Like, and I feel like that's what happens when a lot of curators are just kind of sort of on the surface level, just looking at maybe someone's resume, or they need to check this box or whatever it might be. And it's a really disservice to the artist in a serious way that it does feel very personal and like harmful to the work. Because you're saying, you could have sold it to someone who really cared.
Yeah. And I could have put in an exhibition where it was, displayed better.
When did you decide to take your work and kind of do things yourself? Because you were saying that for the past couple of years, that's how you've been doing, is running your own situation. Like what was kind of the impetus for that, and how have you made that switch?
I would say when I got back so I moved back to Charleston in 2013. So I've been living in New York for a few years after I graduated from Cooper. I had some oddball jobs, freelance graphic design, some commission painting. I was kind of spinning my wheels in New York, and I was like, I can't just be working at Apple until some shit pops off. So
were you working at Apple?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, West Village. Yeah.
The store.
The store, and
I love this. I love this.
Whoever's working there, great.
Yeah.
As they say in the South, bless your heart. But I swear it is creative purgatory. I mean, they hire some of the most creative people that I've ever met. Across so many different fields, industries. I've met amazing filmmakers, writers, other artists, and we would sit there on some days in the heart of New York City, just watching people go by. I felt like we were in a fishbowl, like a tiger in a cage. I was like, man, we gotta get out of here, man. So
I just imagine a young Fletcher like in an Apple store. This is a wild thought to me.
Oh my God.
But also I know what you mean, because again, I feel like in restaurants you're like around these people that go on to have these totally different lives, and you're like, I used to wait tables with them, and it's just a weird thing where you're like, we're all just kind of biding our time and trying to stay afloat and manage doing what we really want to be doing.
Absolutely.
It's so hard.
I mean, we would pull like long days at Apple, and then like to still then have the energy and the motivation to go home and then make art, to switch your brain into that mode. It took a lot of work. And I mean, it was getting towards the last days of my employment at Apple. I mean, there's one time I came from Crown Heights. It's like a 45-minute train ride. And I get maybe a block away. I'm just like, man, this isn't it. This is not the day. And so there's a diner right across the street. I just sat down and had breakfast, and I called in. I was like, I'm sick. I'm not coming in today. And so that was kind of my shift, and I knew there was a departure happening soon. But then one day, I called my mom. I was like, look, I got to come home. Like, Cooper was amazing, but I'm spinning my wheels here.
Yeah.
And so I need to come home and regroup. And so I came back in 2013, and I had some oddball jobs here. I worked as like a graphic designer for a t-shirt company and at a hotel, which is an interesting gig, as a houseman.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
Like a bellman?
Some antiquated. Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, why does
Right. No, I was
what the
like
fuck?
taking out garbage and cleaning the pool at like 7:30 before like guests are
Wow.
waking up. That kind of
Okay.
thing. It's a strange experience.
Wow.
But I also drove the shuttle for a little
Okay.
while too. So I was taking guests from like the marina downtown, like, oh yeah, the churches and the bars and the market, and oh, here are the kids who make roses. I swear they're all good. I mean, you're not, despite what the news outlets say about them around here. But I was still making work. I was at my mom's house at the time.
And what did your work look like then? I'm just so fascinated.
Yeah, so
by
this
it.
was, I mean, even at Cooper and just after Cooper, I was still making work about the South. I was still like kind of channeling my memories here of like gold teeth and hair and just kind of remembering moss on trees, that kind of thing. It's embedded in me at this point. It's not going anywhere. So I was actually before I came back, I had a small show in like a 200 square foot gallery on Rivington in LES. And that was pretty cool. I had some drawings, some very detailed drawings of gold teeth, detailed drawings of hair, grill sculptures in hair gel. Like they were set up like
Cool.
specimens. Those
I
were pretty
love
cool.
that.
Yeah. I had this like 8-foot foam, foam. It was weird, amorphous, not much of a shape at all, actually. It was fabric filled with like blocks of foam, and on the outside of it, there was hair hanging from it, synthetic hair, which is actually my exhibition now.
I
which
know.
I
We're
mean,
gonna talk about it. I
yeah.
love it.
So when I came back to Charleston, I mean that show happened. So I came back to Charleston, and I came back with a different framework. Just having gone through Cooper, where it was about, making strong political statements, making very strong conceptual statements, challenging art history. And I was doing I had done a lot of sculptural work. Finally, at like my last couple of years at Cooper, which I remember at one time telling my professor, I was like, I don't understand sculpture. I was like, what is it I'm missing about making 3-dimensional work? But I think I found my way towards the end in terms of combining my graphic design interest and my painting interest and sculpture interest. And so that's when I started to do a lot of multimedia work, painting on canvas and then mounting objects to it, laser cutting plexi and using LED lights, that kind of thing. So when I got back to Charleston, I was like, I have all the tools, or I guess all the symbols, all of the history, all of the content is there. So I'm like, what am I going to create now with this, having created this framework that I built at Cooper and being in New York? And so in 2013, when I got back from New York, I started really just assembling things. So collecting the roses, wanting to do more woodwork, having worked in an incredible wood shop at Cooper. We did some welding. We were casting plastic, plaster. And so I just opened up a whole new tool set. And so...
That's different than the 20 pieces of watercolor and all the different... You got a whole new one.
Oh, yeah, I got a different set. Yeah, there's no little...
tool set.
Yeah, I go from like little crowns to, miter saws and all kinds of fun stuff. I didn't even have a table for those things when I was making these in my mom's backyard, just like straight on the cement, the patio right there.
Wow.
But so I came back to Charleston with like a very different lens and wanting to, because this place is just so much about culture and preservation. And we say that, but I didn't see it reflected in the work that felt new and contemporary and fresh. And so, and also just, it's so romanticized here, but I'm like, not everything is beautiful. Not everything is romantic. And I'm like, let me start telling my story. I mean, because I came back as a storyteller. I'm like, so I grew up in North Charleston. What about this place is special and significant to me? What about it is ugly and horrendous? And all of those things count. All those things are equally valuable. And so while I was at the hotel, actually, is when I first started to build a relationship with the kids who made roses. Because they would come up to the bus when I opened the door to let the guests out and like try to sell them to me so I can give them to the Rose. And sometimes I would buy them, that kind of thing. But they'd be out there late night hustling, like 10, 11 o'clock at night.
It's wild.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? The Rose needs to be in a space where it's not presented as a transaction and this quick interaction with tourists. I was like, I want to bring this into my work. And I'm just leading up to like the first exhibition I self-produced and co-curated with a friend of mine who I've known for a long time. So he was, we sat in my living room coming up with the curatorial statement, that kind of thing. So my work went from, school days, from paintings, then to Cooper, where it became very multimedia, sculptural, and then back to Charleston with that tool set. And my first show in 2015, after this couple years, was framed drawings, graphite drawings, very detailed drawings, framed in a wood frame where the trough was filled with palmetto roses. I was like, it's very Charleston. The drawings were actually very graphic, very violent.
Wow.
But at the time, I loved Goya's series, Disasters After War. I was like, this is intense. I know he, like, just from reading about the history of those pieces, he had a difficult time publishing them. But eventually they were, like, celebrated. So I was like, this isn't about making a pretty image anymore. This is just about telling a story, regardless of regardless if it's offensive or not to anyone. This is just something I want to share. And so I did. So then, I have the graphite drawings and these beautiful rose frames that kind of drew people into like some imagery they could seemingly not want to.
Yeah, it's just very easy for them to connect with that.
Right,
and then
right.
they actually get closer, and it's like, this is
well, it's
now
too
it's
late
asking
now.
something of you.
Yeah, exactly. So really engaging, really immersive, tactile, and kind of unexpected. But there was a good response to that. And this was 2015 on Spring Street in like a corner shop. It's about 500 square feet or so. And I did this really big sculpture of about 3,000 palmetto roses that was shaped like a tree. And so
I've seen this. It's amazing.
Yeah, so it was like a reintroduction to Charleston right there. And I just love the way that exhibition turned out because I worked with a close friend. We came up with the curatorial statement. We did our own press. We hung the show together. We organized the opening. We invited who we thought needed to be there. It was downtown Charleston. And the whole thing just felt good.
I love it.
And just well produced. And we controlled every aspect of it. I mean, we got press and that kind of thing. And like Post and Courier, local media outlets came through. And I was like, wow, this is what it could be. And I met like collectors who are now friends now. And I'm like, this is what it should look like going forward. And so I did that a few more times. Like there was another one downtown, Beyond the Rainbow, which was another kind of, social critique, commenting on Charleston's kind of housing inequities, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's that's been kind of the path, but that has led to other invitations to show and group shows.
Your resume is insane. I mean, the things that you have, your exhibition. If you want to go check out his entire bio, it's so extensive and so amazing, and it's on Fletcher3.com, and you can read and see all of his. Because you've been written about in the New York Times multiple times, and like you had so many. Yeah,
I got my little shout outs in there.
More to come, but it's the first body of work that I was exposed to was the solo exhibition you did at the Rhett Aiken House.
Oh, right.
Which that's the kind of thing where you look at, and there's still images on your Instagram, and if you want to go see that, if you're listening at home, it's hard for us to just describe art to you on this podcast, but it was like that's when I was like, oh my God, this guy's a fucking genius. This person is a genius. I was like, this is a wild way, because it is beautiful, but it's also like intense, and it does ask a lot of the viewer, but it's done in this like excruciatingly beautiful way. And just, I think what I admire the most about the work that I've seen of yours recently, and the exhibition that's at the International African American Museum right now, is that it's the choices that you make, of all the choices that you could make,
Yeah.
there's so few. You really dial it down to just what is there to tell the story in a way that I find like overwhelming. It's kind of hard to process it. Like I feel like even seeing the exhibition at the International African American Museum, I was like, I'm not going to ask him what it means because I feel like that's a stupid thing to ask an artist. Like they just made this whole exhibit for you to like see. Like they don't want to then have to explain it. And maybe you do want to explain it. And I if you do, you should. But for days after I saw that exhibit, I was like putting pieces together. Like things were I couldn't stop thinking about it, you know, and not even really knowing why. Some of it's not even like, it's what's so smart about your work is that it's not on its nose. Like there is some stuff that you're like, yeah, the roses, like that's just like you're saying an easy entry point for people to come and like say, I can connect to that. I've seen that. I know that. But then once you get in, it's like, oh shit, like you said, it's too late now. And it's amazing. It's like this experience. It takes you on a ride. Right. And then forces you to like think in your own head and try to unravel how it even downloads into your brain. It's wild. It's fucking brilliant.
I'm doing the same thing after looking at some of this work. I mean, you're just in it. You're in it and you're making it. And you don't know the outcome all the time. You never really know the outcome of the work. But how do you, so the International African American Museum reaches out and they're like, we want you to be the first artist to do a solo exhibition in this museum. They also have some of your stuff in their permanent collection, which is amazing. But what goes off in your brain? What's the process? I mean, you're like,
how
okay.
How many years did that take?
I guess, leading up, it's just like you've demonstrated that you have the ability to produce an exhibition and interact with the space in a meaningful way. And like, okay, that's what we're looking for here, I guess. Maybe that's the impetus there. But even with, like, if I go back to Aiken Rhett for a sec, I mean...
Yeah, let's...
Or not.
No, I would love to. Yeah. That body of work, I think, is just astounding.
Because even that work, which a lot of people don't know, wasn't intended for that space. I was looking to do, like, just a cool kind of Brooklyn-style warehouse, very contemporary, no pre-existing context, nothing to frame the exhibition. But
interesting.
Yeah, I'm friends with the former, I don't know her title exactly, but she was managing that property for Historic Charleston. And so after that other space fell through, I was like, because I've always been looking for alternative spaces.
Yeah.
Like just somewhere I can control every piece of the exhibition and not worry about like the gallery's needs or what other organization's needs or what the space looks like. Let me just go in there and do my thing. So when I was talking to her, she's like, well, and she'd been wanting to do some contemporary exhibitions, activations in that space for a long time. And she's like, well, I have this one property downtown. I was like, okay, cool. I'll come check it out. And it's a
fucking Aiken Rhett house.
Fucking Aiken Rhett house. I was like, I think I was trying to get away from all this heavy stuff. I mean, because it is.
Well, it comes so loaded, you know, a place like that, it comes so loaded.
It's super loaded. So then I have to like be responsible in terms of like understanding the history of this place and understanding how historic Charleston is now handling the place and what they're preserving through their research, and then revising the history, revising the way they speak about it, you know, like slave versus enslaved, that whole conversation that's been happening with institutions and historic sites. And so I was like, okay, well, I have an entire body of work that is about the American dream, the white picket fence. I was like, well, what better context to address the American dream at a historic site during the height of social unrest in George Floyd protests and the John C. Calhoun statue coming down.
Right.
Which I could see from the second floor balcony of the Aiken Rhett house. You can see like it just peered just over some trees.
Wow.
So I worked with a good friend of mine, Kelly Turner, who's a curator, and we've known each other for a while. We actually didn't know each other that long before jumping into this project together, but she's like, Kelly would go to bat for me any day. She's one of those curators who, you know, does her homework and she wants to do it the right way and she wants to honor the work. And so we worked together on this and turned it around pretty quickly, but I installed maybe 9 drawings in a house that wasn't climate controlled, and brought in some sculpture from past exhibitions. And it was a challenging project, but we were able to pull it off. But yeah, walking into that space with 2 slave quarters intact, the history of the house there, obviously inside, interior and exterior. I'm like, what kind of statement am I going to make here? But then, because my work, like you said, it's not always on the node, there's a bit of abstraction there. I was able to place things and kind of build a story and kind of let it build itself. And so it was more about pushing people through that space, and activating parts of the property, like the slave quarters, or like specifically that room where there was a sculpture of black pickets over. Well, the thing is, let me back up just a minute. So I read a lot of the history. I read the walking tour, or the self-guided tour. So I was like, let me play along. So let me run parallel to that walking tour and kind of interject, and create this.
Brilliant. Oh my God, it's so good.
Right. I mean, there was like, we're in the kind of the.
Yeah, but even the idea, that idea, I don't think people understand how hard it is to have like an idea like that. But anyway.
Right. Because I mean, this whole thing is, I don't want to go in there and just further beautify the space. I mean,
no, right.
It is a horrendous space. I don't care if the mirrors are gilded, or, you know, you have these beautiful old wood floors, or we talk about the legacy of these merchants whose, you know, families merged and created this dynasty, but also had one of the biggest plantations in South Carolina. Let's dig into that. Also, I still question whether or not I was successful in, you know, kind of raising those questions. But I will say I engaged a pretty vast audience, one that they'd never seen before, at the Aiken Rhett House. And, you know, given Kelly's kind of sense of space and pushing people through a space and activating spaces, and kind of provoking the visitor and having them ask questions and reconsider what the space means as it's still intact, with this contemporary art was an interesting exercise. But yeah, so following that self-guided tour, I wanted to, like I said, interject and run a new narrative parallel to that, which is a pretty awesome thing to do, I guess. But I pulled in the things that, well, this is a part of my practice, like an overarching, I guess, strategy, to bring in those like very familiar symbols and materials, I mean, that people interact with on a daily basis. So the white picket fence, we see this all the time.
Yeah.
So now it's like, you have this new association. You brought one in. I don't know what your relationship is with the white picket fence, the American Dream, that whole thing, but now you're going to leave with the Aiken Rhett House attached to it. That's what I'm guessing happened. Who knows? I mean, some people call me like, oh yeah, I saw a white picket fence. I still get those texts randomly. I'm like, okay, so there's a lasting impact there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%. I mean, I think that's a symbol that's like very easily associated with you and your work, like without a doubt. Like people see that. But what I think is wild about that is like, do you feel like you're the person who was saying, hey, you could do your show here because that space fell through? It doesn't sound like that was really the intention, like, right? Like they're trying to showcase that place in maybe a different way that they weren't expecting. And you really kind of, without like, you know, I don't know, like doing it intentionally, like, well, no, it was intentional, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it kind of ballooned into something else. You know what I mean? She's just like, here's a space, you can do your show here. Yeah.
I mean, I could have taken any direction.
Right.
With that. I think she was who invited me, but I will say Aiken Rhett was probably surprised by what was happening. They're like, okay, what's going on here exactly?
Right. I love this. Because in the end, it's like that there was a very different end result, which for the best.
Right.
But I just think that's a wild thing, because that is, in some ways, you could look at Charleston and be like, that's the crux of it all. Like people are trying to say, like, come here, it's a beautiful place to be. And then you get here and it's like, if you really want to dig into how like this place and what it means and what it is and why you're coming here in the first place, like it encapsulates all of that with what you did in that show.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, artists have the ability to do that, and I think that's why Charleston shies away from giving artists the permission to activate these spaces, because we dig up a lot. I mean, just so naturally. Well, I mean, we're we're just naturally inquisitive. So then, if we're looking for the truth in some way, I mean it's going to surface, and that's what happened at Aiken Red House. I mean that house exists the way it is, obviously, and they're telling that history, but very rarely is there an indictment of that house or like the legacy of that house or the people involved in like the violence towards other people. And I think that's what the work did. Those are the questions the work was asking. And especially because the picket fence is still such a very popular, recognizable American symbol, I presented this story like it's an active narrative.
Yes.
Because this is just the past. This isn't still stagnant. I mean, this is a part of like, yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I think
that's amazing.
I think Aiken Red was like, what did we invite here? Yeah.
I think it's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, that is honestly, if there is sort of a way for Charleston to like kind of continue to develop in a way that is on the positive side, like it has to be that way.
Yeah.
It's never like, we can't just like, I don't know, be like, yeah, there's great beaches and a lot of history, but just the ones we want to talk about. It's like,
oh yeah,
there's so much more to that. And it's interesting because I don't want to like speak badly about it, but I feel like the Charleston art scene is still developing very much so, and is still very much in its infancy compared to maybe other cities that have as much press as Charleston now has and visibility as Charleston now has. And I think, like I said, behind the scenes, I think people are like, Charleston's art scene has a long way to go because people don't want to, because of what you're saying. Aiken Rat House doesn't want to have it showcased in that way. And so when it does happen, though, that's the breakthrough. Like, that's where you can actually have something that's real here. That's like, this is, now we're actually like taking a look at something in a real way.
Right. Yeah. If you want to have the conversation, like art is probably one of the easiest ways to have that conversation.
Yes.
And that's why I think even at the height of the pandemic there in 2020, a lot of people didn't have the language or know how to speak about issues of violence.
Yeah.
So now you could visit the Aiken Red House where you can sit with yourself in front of a work of art, not have to have necessarily kind of a confrontation of any kind, other than with yourself, maybe in that house, in that work, and have that internal dialogue. And so I think it was, oddly enough, I don't know if this is the right phrase, but like a safe space.
Yeah.
In a way to
You made it a safe space, so because I'm like, it's
right.
That's you did that.
Yeah, and so to have like large works of art hanging in the parlors and in those spaces, you couldn't just sit there and admire the beauty and the grandeur of that place. You had to like, okay, there's this huge painting of picket fence in here that's like cutting into the architecture.
It's striking. Yeah, it's striking, and it's almost chilling. It is chilling. Like there was like, it looked like a structure that was almost like a bed, but there were the roses, and it was like I mean, you can take that in a million different ways that you want to take that, but it was like,
it was a little eerie,
chilling.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so to walk out in a seemingly like picturesque, beautiful part of that house, the piazza right there, and you see what looks kind of, well, at least for me, was, I've always used that blanket as a burial shroud, and it was laying on like sheets of tin, which someone can interpret as bodies, or just like actually just remnants of a fallen house, that kind of thing, which ties back into like displacement of people and the removal of homes, that kind of thing. But it was a very stark juxtaposition, having even that blanket on the porch. And it stopped, you literally encountered, it stopped you in your path. I mean, it interfered with like
you being able to go forward.
Yeah, exactly. You had to interact with it. And so there were moments like that, even in the workyard, the garden, where I set up that house in the palm fronds and the brick columns, which actually they let me use. Those were bricks from a cloud plantation that were stored there.
Oh, wow.
So to be able to use that in the work was amazing. And then the pickets on the second floor that stood above the kitchen, which apparently would always be running,
wow.
In preparation for, guests of the house. So just to be up there sweating in that small box. But yeah, so those kind of, I I enjoy those kind of activations. But still, it gets a little heavy though, because I will say that kind of led to the way. Let's see. The work that I have at the International African American Museum, which for me was a moment of levity, I guess I can say, but also that's another historic site.
Yeah.
In place. But I gave myself the liberty and the freedom to not necessarily speak to everything in that museum, which I didn't know. I didn't know if I was going to do that. I didn't know which direction I should take when I was invited to exhibit there. But
That's what I'm saying. When I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, but I was given permission to kind of, yes, this museum exists in all its significance, but just do what you do.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if I can just be, and I've been looking for that moment for a while, because there was Aiken Rhett. Then I did the show before that was about, like gun violence, police violence. I was like, gosh, can't all be so heavy, because I'm like, I also want to enjoy the process, and I also don't want it to always be research based. I also want this to be kind of self-exploratory and experimental, because at the heart of it, you want to make beautiful things. You want to like explore certain aesthetics, and that's what I was able to do at the museum at IAM. And so yeah, I've revisited hair and car bass, and
I love the sound. I love the sounds so much, because it's like a true like sound bath of like different. It goes from like 808s to thunderstorms to street sounds to bells to like it is a psychedelic feel, and it feels like a trip, but like you feel the lightness in it. I think without it being like frivolous and just non-substantial. Like it has substance. It has so much substance. And that's one of the things that I always feel like an idiot when I see anyone's art. I'm always just like, am I just like feeling like I'm trying to get the test right? Like they gave me a test and I'm answering the questions correctly. Like, oh, I picked up on this aspect, but I didn't feel that way seeing your work. It was more just like a really fun time. And we took the boys, and we had 3 little boys, and they had fun being in space, because it is just like it's trippy, like, and you kind of harken back to other work where you've got the picket fence, but they're like wavy, like and there's mirrors. It's like Funhouse almost, and then there are places to just be. Like there's 3 center rooms, not to give it away for all the but there's places to just be. Like you're kind of in there, sort of like. And it's
no, I want people to spend time in there. I mean,
we stayed for so long.
Spend as much time as you want or need in that space. And I've always loved creating those immersive experiences that require you to kind of walk through and interact with the work. And that's exactly what this is. And like you said, I revisited some of kind of those old, not old, I won't say, but motifs in my work, but also materials and old like experiences and memories and fond memories of places and things. And it is fun. And so it's challenging in that space because the history that's told in that museum, just the site itself is very significant. I mean, Gadsden's Wharf, where people were brought in off the ships and, lives were lost there on that site. And it's essentially a memorial. So you have the weight of that going into the museum, then the story of the African American experience told within the museum, slavery to civil rights to present day. And so what I'm realizing is that it's this exhibition is a very different experience after walking through the rest of that museum. If you tour that museum, spend time in there, and then you walk into this space, you're like, because I've been in there and I've run into a few people, and I mean even strangers, and like what is this? What does this mean? I'm just like
exactly.
Yeah. I'm just like, just give yourself permission to experience this. Just soak it up. Like don't ascribe any meaning right now. Just look around, just gaze, just meander. And if certain things don't have particular meaning to you, then they don't. But I tell people this is just a page out of my diary. So, I mean, if you're reading any fictional work, I mean, you're in there for the experience. maybe have specific associations, but it feels very romantic in there. It feels very intimate.
It does.
And this is the way I would describe the South to anyone who didn't know what it looks like and feels like. And so that's essentially what's happening in that gallery.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing. It's so, and you're totally right, because we got into the museum and we went through the whole museum, and you have 30-minute time blocks that you're supposed to be in there. So I was like, there's no way I can even get through all of the material in the museum. I mean, but there's like so much to see, so much to take in, and each thing is, you're already in a certain headspace,
right.
That is emotional and also like celebratory and thought provoking, and like there's a lot of things happening sensorily. But then you come into your space in the museum, and it really does feel like a release, or like a totally different like sensory experience from where you just were.
Yeah.
But then you can't help but have some of those ideas and the thoughts and the feelings and emotions that you experience from being in the museum kind of play into that in some way.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So you did it such beautiful justice to kind of leave space. And I don't know, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I felt like it gives you an option to then process what happened and what you just saw and what you just experienced in the museum in a way that is just like, it feels like, I don't know. It feels like a release.
Because I'm not responsible for telling a particular story.
No.
With any specificity or accuracy.
No.
And I just have the freedom in that space to offer another experience to people visiting the museum, and it is a very different sensory experience. And I mean, I'm still probably bringing in my relationship with the picket fence. I mean, I'm continuously distorting and manipulating that object. Now, in other works, it was, its traditional shape, rigid, upright. In other pieces, I've kind of deconstructed it and like contorted it. And now here, it does have that funhouse feel, which I'm like, oh my gosh, was I like at the fair when I thought of this or something like that? I mean,
this is one thing I wanted to ask you, but I'm like, is that dumb? Where do you find meaning in it later that you don't even know? Like it feels like artists maybe, and especially you, are not even maybe fully aware of what you're creating, even though you're aware of the idea. It's all of it is yours.
Right.
But I mean, like, once you see it fully done and you can step back and look at it, are there things that have come to you that you're like, holy shit, that was like maybe in there the whole time, but was not it was maybe in my subconscious and not consciously being put in there? Or is everything like, no, because I know you've spoken about controlling what's in the work. Are there things that you saw later and were like, oh, maybe this is like, has it shown you stuff? Oh,
absolutely. I've gotten new ideas for work already from this exhibition. But yeah, it just depends on the context. Like Aching Red, I feel like there was a responsibility to some degree to really take into account the site. But in this one, you have to be careful not to over edit your ideas or the direction you're heading. And I'm quite comfortable with unfamiliarity, I guess I could say. Like if it feels too familiar and too recognizable, I'm like, I'm doing something I've already done before. I'm about to create something I've already created. And so you want to challenge yourself. I mean, you want to present new ideas. And it's also, like I said, self-discovery. I mean, I want to bring all these things into the same space. I want to see what these things look like.
Yeah.
And you can't do that until you do it. And it's unpredictable at times. I mean, so I kind of relish in that moment of like, okay, I'm just going to go for it. It's not about creating something that's right or wrong, or beautiful or not, or successful or not. It's just, this is the art I was compelled to make at this moment, and we'll see what it looks like. I think this looks pretty cool.
It's so fucking.
I'm still asking myself questions. I'm like, was it a good decision to put, a wall-to-wall wavy picket fence with blue mirror behind it, and next to 3 rooms that are, fitted with neon plexi and hair that, is meant to kind of echo moss hanging from a tree, that kind of thing. Because a few things did change in that exhibition. Like there were some parts that aren't in that exhibition and some rearrangements of other things. And
what did you take out?
Well, there was at one point I thought it'd be interesting. So this is pretty much a collage of, memories and just like short trips, like drives from one place to another, nightscapes, that kind of thing.
That part really came through for me. I was like, it feels like a night out. Like it feels like fun. It's got this like electric
Yeah.
energy to it.
Right. No,
It's
absolutely.
really fun.
Absolutely. So and that's the thing about this exhibition. I want all of those things to be experienced simultaneously, like instantly. So I'm like, you walk from like a ceiling, maybe indoor, outdoor space, you're not sure, into this very dark LED lit room with hair hanging from the walls and back out into another kind of exposed interior, exterior space. And yeah, where were we at just now? I got lost in it.
It's so, I mean, I don't even know. It doesn't, I'm just like anything you want. Oh, the things that we took out, that you took out.
Yeah.
Now it's me and you. Now
We came a long way, Lindsay.
When we were making this exhibit. No, what did you take out?
I mean, there were curtains on the middle room. So I was like, I imagine myself. So a lot of the work feels, it sometimes, despite it being sculptural, visual, I think of it more of a as a reenactment. And so I'm like, what does it feel like for me to be driving where the sun is starting to set and then it gets dark and then I turn the corner and there's a corner store there where the LED lights are flashing. So in order to recreate that moment of encountering something unexpected, I'm like, maybe you shouldn't be able to see into one of these rooms and know what's inside of it until you walk in there and pull the curtain. But then you get the work in there, you're like, I really like looking down this tunnel, this hallway, and seeing all these spaces at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so those are some of those decisions where you're like, it could go either way.
And the sidelines are so beautiful, like especially when you're in the center room. Like that's what I mean with all the choices that you can make. I'm like, literally, someone gave you a space, and then it's like, that's one of the most intense asks. I'm like, that's never mind where it even is. That's its own layer.
Right.
Like that's a million other layers. But I'm like, even just creating an experience like that, these are a million little choices that you made that are so impactful. Mm-hmm. And it's wild to think that like the final product, like once it was up, we're I don't know, that you're like, this is what it is. I can't go back now. Like it's kind of nice.
There
to
is that
just
moment.
Have a deadline and be like, we're done.
Yeah, like that. Okay, that's it. Oh, it's up. But no, it went through several ideations. All the preliminary sketches. I mean, even last minute changes in terms of like color palette. Which again, those decisions were more primarily aesthetic choices, because I mean, as much as there is a narrative there, like I said, you also just want to make work that is beautiful and like visually interesting, and you have to like that task has to run alongside, like,
which is a thing that I think a lot of artists do one or the other. They're very rarely can they pull both of them together, because that's like it's very hard. It's like almost impossible to like straddle that line of like, is this aesthetically not even beautiful in its traditional terms, but I just mean like interesting to look at, and also has some sort of meaning or challenges someone. Like I feel like people either stay in one lane where like, I'm just making shit that looks cool, or I'm making something that's like really like throwing out a statement that's so again on the nose, or like in just too straightforward, where it's like there isn't anything left for the relationship between the work and the viewer.
You don't want to work it to death. I mean, it is hard to straddle that line, and sometimes I think I straddle it too closely. Sometimes I don't think I've given myself permission to kind of abandon certain ideas or modes of making, but in this one, I think there are some departures in it from my previous works.
For sure.
Yeah. And I get excited by those. But like when it came down to me selecting the hair color, the mirror color, whether or not, I mean, I was in there 2 weeks before this thing went up. I'm like, am I actually going to stain it? Or am I just going to leave it like bare raw wood? I was like,
I mean, God, that's what I'm saying. How do you just like wait for it to feel? Do Do you think
You
your
really
way
gotta
out of it? Do you feel your way out of it? Is it something in
You
between?
gotta trust your gut. You're just
Yeah.
like, you know what, I'm gonna go for it. And because some of those decisions you can't go back. Like if I were to stay in that wood, that's it. Maybe I can paint it and get away with it, but no. Once you kind of have to make those commitments in the process. And I think if you don't, then that's where you can kind of go wrong. Because then it's like there's a domino effect. You're like, well, I didn't commit to that decision. That's going to affect the next one, and then, oh shit, maybe this thing is starting to fall apart. Yeah. So I mean, and then it just gets down to practical things. Like certain materials weren't available. I had to shift. Like plexi was low stock. I was like, oh shit. Well, what else do you have available? I was like, okay, if I get that color, then in terms of making those decisions, I'm like, okay, that color still complements that. I think those are within the same value, and I think that hair will still work with that. I was like, okay, cool. This has that iridescent kind of color shifting quality, which is another effect to be activated in the space. I was like, okay, that still works. And I was like, what goes inside of these things? Do I want to create these totems? Do I want people to sit? Where do I want them to interact? How do I want them to interact? How would I want to interact with this space? Where would I want to sit and rest and take time, spend time in there? So, yeah, a lot of those. And this was a very quick project. I mean, this was like a 5-month project.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So,
Dude, that's incredible. That's so. It doesn't feel like it. I would have been like you weren't thinking about that or working on that. And in some ways, you have been.
Right,
your whole
right.
career and everything that you experience comes
Yeah.
with you. So it's there, but it's still like to put something together on a deadline like that is intense.
oh yeah. Also, you're like, you know what? I've been given permission to do this thing. Let me try some ideas out.
Yeah.
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 That I haven't before. Now that I have the resources and the space to do it. So if there's honestly any place to fail,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
in someone else's space with someone else's time.
Your perspective is so genius, though, because I'm like, some people would do something, would see it as the opposite. It's not like, this is my first museum show. I can't, there is no room for failure. And I just feel
Right,
like
let
you
me
turn
play it
everything
safe.
on its head when it comes to how do you think about being an artist, and it's why you're where you are. Like, that's that sort of ability to turn something on its head and think of it a different way, because you mentioned the corner store, and in the spaces, there's 3 spaces. They're like boxes and rooms that you can
Yeah.
go into that are connected. And I was like, wow. I was like, I immediately was like corner store. And then later, 3 days later, I'm still thinking about the exhibit. I'm driving in my car and a police SUV pulls up to me, and I look through the black windows, and it was like the thing that keeps the and I was like, wait, is that the same? And I was like, holy shit, this guy's fucking still in my head. He's still in my head 3 days later. Like, I just continue to think about all of the different meanings, even though it really is very subtle.
Yeah.
Your work is brilliant in the subtle.
I think there's like the bit of that psychological part to it, and like knowing that, because even like, when you like activate a memory by smelling something, I feel like all those memories are they're just resting. We haven't really forgotten anything. We just can't like what is it? What am I trying to say?
It's not tangible.
Yeah, you can't
Grab
go in
it.
there and reach those memories unless they're activated. And certain certain memories, I feel like are connected to a certain emotion or emotional state, and so you won't remember something until like you're in a similar emotional state. You're like, okay, all these, like, then it's like it opens up that portal to those things. And so I'm like, I can't be the only one that has a relationship with these materials. They're very subtle. They're aesthetically pleasing. But like even that metal grate, you saw that in the back of the police car. There's still like the pit roasting of hogs.
Right.
I mean, it's used there. And also it's a security screen, corner store windows, residences,
Totally.
that kind of thing.
I mean, not all of the, like, I went through so many iterations of like what I could take that meaning or what it activated in my memory and how it just keeps growing in my mind.
Oh, I mean, I can see this exhibition there's a lot of life in it.
Yeah.
Still. And I mean, there's definitely, I have some ideas of how to activate it in other ways, even once it leaves this museum. So I'm still excited about that.
What is it like when you build structures the way you do in your art? Is sculpture, like, where does it go and what is the process?
I'm trying to figure that out. So
I'm fascinated by that because I'm like, what do you do with it when it comes down, and where does it go, and how does it?
I would say that's one of the biggest challenges of being a sculptor and installation-based artists. It's like, where the heck am I going to put all of this work? I mean, storing is an expense.
Yeah. God, I didn't think about that. I'm like, that's wild too.
But hopefully for this, I mean, the best case scenario is to be invited to show this exhibition somewhere else.
I'm sure you will be.
And then, so maybe a curator will see it, maybe a university will see it, and like, okay, we can host that, like bring it here. I'm like, okay, cool. But in the meantime, it's going to have to be stored. But luckily, this whole thing is modular, so it can be broken down, but it still has a pretty hefty footprint.
Yeah.
But had I thought about, that would have been one of the, if I were to consider that going into making this project, I probably wouldn't have made it. I was just like, I'll figure that out.
That's right.
After.
That's wild.
Yeah. So it's fun going in without, giving yourself those parameters. Like, I'm just.
Oh, I mean, I think honestly, that I feel like is its own lesson. It's just like to kind of create without worrying about where it ends up or what happens. I just personally am curious because I'm like, what does a sculptor do with their work, and how does a collector, where do they put it, and what happens to it? Because it is such an amazing thing to experience, and then you're like, where does it go when it leaves there? But
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to sit in storage. I mean, I miss some of my artwork. I'm like, can I come visit my artwork in your home?
Yeah.
Like, can I? Like, you got to go see it in a permanent collection, something like that. But that's also part of making any work of art. I mean, you don't want to have to think about whether or not this thing is going to sell.
No.
Or whether or not you're going to have to hold on to it or store it. Just
make it.
Yeah, that's debilitating.
Yeah. No, it's a super limiting mindset when it comes to what's possible and what you should be doing. And it adds all these like thoughts that don't really have any bearing on the work itself. Right.
Because even when it comes to scale and the materials you use, a lot of my stuff isn't easy to take care of. It's either like it's difficult to ship. It's fragile. I've used some natural material. And I'm like, is this thing going to corrode or decay? You want this piece, where are you going to put it? Because it may not last out there, that kind of thing. So there are a few things to consider once that the piece is made. But, you don't want to think about that stuff while you make it.
What is your, like, I'm just going to talk to you for hours, so I got to let you go at some point. I was like, it'll only take like 40 minutes.
No, I'm making sure. I'm just like, I'm probably.
I have nothing to do with this.
I'm going on these, like, long rants about stuff.
I love it. I'm like, that's what we're here for. What is your process like? If you're someone who's kind of, like you said, in control of it now and like on your own, like you're managing yourself essentially.
Yeah.
Which is sort of not controversial, but like something that a lot of artists are sort of, I feel like I see artists struggling with, like their goal is to get representation, or the goal is to get this, and the goal is to be in these spaces because they see these as viable avenues to advance their career or to keep being able to do what they do.
Right.
So when you're managing it yourself, which I think is the future, by the way, I think that is where it's going, because it eliminates you, like you said, considering other things and people when you're making the work. It can be more pure.
Right.
What is next? Like when you're thinking you've just finished this really amazing body of work, how do you come up with the next thing, and what do you set like in terms of timeline for yourself? Do you?
Yeah, what does that look like? What does that look like a month from now, or 6 months from now, a year from now? It is a tough question to answer, but I mean, I am at a point though where I will need some help. It won't be like, a traditional gallery or, being represented by someone. And I mean, I do have kind of these informal partnerships with some galleries, that kind of thing. If it works and it fits and it feels right, so let's do it. But having to figure out where the work is going to go, maintaining relationships with collectors, maintaining relationships with other artists who may or may not be showing in galleries or museums, and getting their recommendations to reach out to certain people. It is a lot to manage. Even just keeping up with your own inventory and like buying materials, self-funding work. It's self-funding sculpture. I mean, it's super challenging. But in terms of coming off this exhibition, I mean, I do have opportunities I have some commission work, which I don't do that often unless it's in line with what I'm doing now. Because there's nothing worse than being taken away from like the current agenda with the work and being asked to do something that is like past work. You've moved on from that thing and like, do I really want to do that? This is going to take all the energy out of me, and I'm like pushing forward. So there's that. But I do have some other exhibition opportunities through fellow artists, and I'm looking forward to those. It's a day-by-day thing. I mean...
Totally. That's what I'm saying. It feels...
You get yourself a little cushion, but then you try to, you keep it as long as you can until you get the next, like, museum opportunity or something like that. But it's very unpredictable.
It is, and I feel like it can and sometimes be a reason why people aren't working. I know an artist personally who's like, I can't afford to work at the scale that I want to work at right now, and so he's not working. And to me, I'm like, that's a weird place to be.
Yeah,
because it's like, I as an outsider looking in, I'm like, well, then work with something that you can work with, but it's there. That's not right either. You can't really say like this is how you should be working. Like it's a weird thing to be like, what I want to make costs money to make, and having to choose between like staying true to what the vision is and what you can afford to make. Yeah. And you don't know if it's going to sell, and you don't know or when it's going to sell. I know your work will sell, but you don't know when. You
don't. I mean, it's very unpredictable, and you're making big investments. You're taking big bets, making big bets, and and that's and even that in that scenario, like artists are very stubborn too. I mean, I know what I want to do when I want to do it. Nobody's going to tell me how to do it.
I know that's right, though. I think that's right. Yeah. I just it's a weird game to play.
Yeah, and so, and then even because I feel like I do. If someone tells me to do something or recommend something, I probably won't do it. Just because they told me, I'm like maybe it's I don't know if it's just me or not, but
no, I don't think it's just you.
You want to, I don't know, that's weird too, because I've gotten comfortable with collaborating more just because I can see how productive I can be. Like in this last project at the museum, it took nearly probably 20 or so people to
Is that the first time you've had other people working on stuff, or have you done that for your personal projects?
For an exhibition, this is the first time I've worked with a team of fabricators to produce an exhibition. And it was interesting. I mean, and all of them weren't on board. Not on board in terms of like wanting to work on this project and understanding the project, but in terms of hiring people, kind of last minute even. I'm like, oh shit, we're on a deadline.
We need hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's like some things happened that required me to call on a lot of people, and luckily they were available. I mean, selfishly, the silver lining with the writer's strike is that there were some pretty amazing, talented people
out of work,
temporarily,
hopefully.
Yeah, and just like jumped in with no problem.
That's amazing.
And like, they have a saw in their hand, and like within 30 minutes, and like, what else you need, Fletch?
Wow.
I'm like, okay, so you're done. Okay, let me give you something else to do. But yeah, that was the first time that this is the first time I really collaborated with a big team of.
But I feel like that's so different than like a commission, for example. I feel like is a lot of times someone else seeing your talents, your ability, your perspective and brain and all of that and being like, I would like to harness that for something I have in mind. You know what I mean? And commissions can feel very... Like Jeremy hates doing commissions because you can never really meet the expectation.
Right.
They're never truly happy with it, or they're like, or they say something along the lines of, take a look, like they give you a recipe, like this thing plus that thing you did plus this thing, and mash it together with this horse that I loved when I was young. And it's like that sort of thing can feel really not good to the artist, but then at the same time, you're fighting all of these things. Like, I do need to keep being able to make work. Is there a way we can meet in the middle where I can protect my vision and also give you what you want?
Right.
And it's very hard to do.
Yeah. No,
and it's just not as lucrative. I think a lot of people just assume that, but it's cool. That's totally different from collaborating and saying like, I have a vision. it's so big that I need more than I can do on my own. That's cool. That's exciting.
No, that is exciting. I'm like, I step back sometimes, like, damn, that took a huge team of people, some ideas. I mean, some improvisation, a lot of sweat, a little blood, a little tears. But we pulled it off, and everyone's excited about it. I'm like, okay, I could do this again, because it was kind of a first for me. But it was very rewarding. And I'm like, gosh, these projects can get bigger and better.
Yeah.
Like, where else can I pitch this? Who else is interested in this kind of work? Because I mean, I'm sitting on, like, a sketchbook full of ideas that I feel like would be just amazing to be able to pull off. But again, that's like, people kind of seeing this work, taking some interest, believing that you could pull this off again, and giving you the space to experiment and maybe even fail a bit too. And so I never really worked like this before, but because I'm usually in my studio by myself, like trying to control every little piece of the project. Because I said this to one of the guys that worked on this exhibition. I was like, man, I think the biggest challenge for me in this project was like trusting absolute strangers to care about this work as much as I did, at least enough to pull it off the way I envisioned it.
And to have the capacity to share the vision. Like, even that, it's like they might be trying to do it, and it's like they're not, they just don't.
Oh, yeah, because I mean...
That's so hard.
Because there were moments where, like, I don't know what we're making. I'm gonna do my thing, and then hopefully it'll all come together, in the end, and we'll be able to understand what's happening. So, yeah, there were some scary moments in pulling this exhibition off, but it definitely came together. And so, yeah, it's nice to work with a group of people who are just there to support the vision and to pull the project off. Because, like those, going back to commissions, when you have people just cherry picking at your practice and like, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? I like what you did there, but it also needs to fit on this wall. And there's that thing in the room that I think this would go great with.
Right.
And you're like, is this even me? Because then I've taken time away from my work to produce this thing that I probably don't even want people to see.
Yeah, right.
You want to be proud of the work you produce. I mean,
I'm always just like, if you like this artist, just buy something that they make.
That too.
Like, why do people feel like they want to harness? It's so seductive. They're like, well, that looks, what you're doing is really cool. I'd like to have some input in that. You know what I mean? It's like kind of a wild concept to like commission an artist. Although I know that it works really well for some artists, depending on the medium and what they do. It's totally different.
Right. Like you said, because I mean, you can then use that money then to make the work you want to make. But it's just, I think it's more the time away from having to step away.
Yeah.
From the work you're currently making. But I mean, I've taken on commission projects. Some have been incredibly rewarding, others not so much. But I'm also like, do you want the work that I don't really love?
Yeah.
I try to say that. I try to include that in the conversation.
Yeah.
And then hopefully that'll stick and land. But yeah, so there's like a billion and one ways to make this thing work.
It's a wild thing to be. I just feel like the work that you're doing and who you are and where you are and the fact that you're still in this city, because I know and we talked about this offline a little bit, but like there's such a pull to go to a bigger city, go back to a bigger city for you, where it's like maybe your work would be, or maybe the scene is different or more developed, or you have better opportunities and all these things. But how do you feel about that? I mean, I feel like the world is so small now. It's more, doesn't necessarily matter where you live, but we keep seeing kind of talent moving to other places.
Oh,
from here.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people say to me directly that I should leave Charleston to be appreciated, and to find better opportunities and to have my work shown in better spaces. So it's not so damn difficult to be a freaking artist,
right?
To just want to create something interesting and engaging. And I don't know why it's so challenging for Charleston to support artists here and to create space, to create working space. Because I mean, I've been on, so many committees, subcommittees, feasibility studies, like that, art space comes here, or we're trying to figure out what school can be repurposed as a studio, figuring out what and who needs to be involved to financially support a studio, live work kind of development in Charleston. And so for that reason, because we haven't figured it out yet, we keep losing a lot of talent, unfortunately. But I've said this to many people going back to the early days of Spoleto, which I'll be on my speaker box, so I mentioned a few times. A few friends reach out to me and like, okay, all right, Fletcher's social media rant has commenced. Everybody chime in, grab your popcorn.
I love it. They're so good.
But, Spoleto is performance like they focus on performance in theater. But at one point there was some incredible visual art, public art happening. I'm like, where'd that go? Like, why did we abandon that? There's so many artists who could still pull this off. And so instead of, local museums like leaping over the talent that exists here in Charleston, also even the state, they go outside to find the next hottest artist, whoever's doing their thing, wherever. And I'm like, if that keeps happening, it's a continuous slap in the face to those of us that pretty much we bust our ass to work here in a city that doesn't support contemporary art much at all. And like people just burn out.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, I'm going to go to New York or LA or Chicago or Miami, that kind of thing. Shit, even parts of South Carolina. People are like, I'd rather go to... Yeah.
It's like art fields. We can go there. Like, they care more, it seems. Like they
Truly, I mean, the galleries up there are incredible. It's unfortunate that it's like in the middle of nowhere.
Nobody wants to be there.
Right.
Sorry, art fields. But, I mean, we do. But not all year long.
No. I'm like, can we bring art fields to Charleston somehow? But
it's so true because I didn't actually go to Berkeley, but I was accepted into Berkeley. I moved to Boston. I dropped out immediately. I was playing music there, but I noticed immediately that the city is set up to support musicians. There's all these music colleges and spaces and that are dedicated to that aren't just turned into another condo,
right,
or another hotel that we don't need. And it's like, and then you wonder why it's just sort of this self-perpetuating problem that everybody seems to me, I mean, I'm not like a city planner, but it seems pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Like allocating certain space.
We should be.
Yeah. We're really taking over the world, Fletcher. But it's just, there isn't space that's given to it. And so you see people that are like either trying to work out of their homes, but that comes with its own limitations. Like there's only so much space depending on the size and scale of what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And it's just sort of like you're on your own. Kind of. And then it's like, well, yeah, that's why we have to look outside for other talent because there isn't here. And it's like, well, if you would just so into what's here and give them a space that isn't $3,000 a month to have a studio that's the size of my dining room. That's like, this isn't even a viable space to work. You know what I mean? And I'm like, it's tough when that's like how you have to be. And I think obviously, and this is a hot take from me, but it influences the style of work, the chances that people take.
Oh yeah.
It has repercussions beyond just like, it's too expensive to live here, and so I'll just move somewhere else. It's more than that. It goes deeper than that and impacts the type of work that we're seeing.
Oh, absolutely.
From artists.
Yeah, because if I see Jeremy paint a oyster shell,
it's like we're about to put our house on the market. Like,
about to lose everything.
It's like really dire.
Yeah, no, there's some serious consequences to not supporting the creative community, and we're seeing that. And it does. Yeah, it's a weird the style of work that's being produced, then the audience or not that we're able to cultivate.
Exactly.
I mean, we can't. And of course, we all know that the elephant in the room is tourism. So if you're not contributing to that machine, then there's really no support for you. If you're not drawing in tourists to look at the beautiful homes and the mansions and the sunsets and telling that story, I mean, you're not very valuable to this city.
Right.
Which is
fucked.
Very fucked. I'm like, what? So what is next, and how long can we keep this thing propped up?
I don't know, because I feel like even as someone who's rooted in food and bev, like for a while, that was the hot new toy. It's like, hey, we got a food scene now. Right? Like, because I can remember being in Charleston in 2004, 2005, when there really weren't, like when I moved to New York and was working in Michelin star restaurants, I remember being like, not embarrassed that they'd be like, where'd you come from? And I was like, Charleston. And they would have nothing to say. It's like they didn't even exist in the world of restaurants. Like no one respected it. And then Sean Brock or whoever comes here and like, suddenly, when I came back, it was like there was this buzz about the restaurant scene being on the come up, which it has. It's been super quickly developed, and now that's like the offering that we give to the world. But I'm like, why can't we do that with other, maybe even more substantial industries? I obviously love restaurants. That's my world. That's my space. But it's possible. It's possible when you like put effort into that and make spaces for that and put an emphasis on that. But if they can't, like you're saying, make tourism dollars off of it, then where's the motivation to do it?
Yeah, if you can support and create that food and bev industry, why can't you apply that same formula
to art? You
Yeah.
absolutely could, because I'm like in other major cities, that's like the thing that you go for. When you go to London, you go to the Tate. Like there's these draws. Like New York, you go to the Met. Like it doesn't have to be a museum to have a thriving art scene. But it does take intention. And there was an intentional push from the city to develop the food scene to try to save, to encourage tourism.
Yeah, but that's that part of the development. That's the part of the formula that we don't have. There's an interest in creating culture. We just have an interest in preserving culture. And so it's stagnant. There's no new ideas being put on the table. I mean, the artists have them, but we're not being supported. That's the one thing I enjoyed about going out in New York to, those Thursday openings. I mean, what are we going to see tonight? I have no idea. New work, new ideas, someone experimenting with video or collage or sculpture or like very graphic imagery. I mean, just things that the artists were able to dictate kind of that moment. And I think artists here aren't given that permission.
No. And if they take it anyway, it's the message comes back to them pretty quickly that that's not how you're going to get anywhere.
Right. Yeah. No, we're here to talk about slavery and the Black experience in the Civil War and cannons and Victorian homes and plantations. And I'm like, that's not all that exists here. I mean, Charleston it just feels very stagnant when you start talking about that. I'm like, there are people that live here.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people that are like tethered to the rest of the world.
Having an experience that's unique and to now.
Right.
That's not rooted in something that was or like.
Yeah, and I even think I get that as I deal with it's a challenge. It's challenging even as I think a Black artist. If I'm not talking about issues of race or poverty or injustice or police violence or just the Black experience in general, there's less space for me to present the work because it doesn't fit into programming. It doesn't fit into programming that institutions use to apply for funding. I mean, there's always like some big social cultural component that's necessary, but those components are also very limiting.
Yes.
Yeah. And so where's the freedom to just be an experimental artist? Where's the freedom to just deal specifically in aesthetics and abstraction? I mean, that's a topic of, this is an ongoing issue.
This is something I think about though. And I know obviously that's your experience with it, which is wild because I'm like, that's almost in a way, like it's furthering, it's more limited. You have limitations on you somehow that shouldn't be there.
Well, that's just a part of like, it's not even money that influences the work that artists make. It's also, it's coming from the top too, like what institutions are looking for to be a part of certain conversations, which some are very important, but I'm like, are all the artists now going to flock to making work about that subject? Right. I'm like, it can't. Yeah, I hit a wall when I started even talking about that.
I know what you mean, though, on a different, it's not on the same level in any capacity, but even being a female in certain things, they'll like want to talk about like the opportunities that you get or the things that they want you to speak to, or like work-life balance, or like being a mom and trying to do this, pursue your what you're doing, your career,
Right,
your passion,
right.
your art. And so it's like, it starts to just weigh on you where you're like, I don't even want to have, I don't want that entering. It's fine if it does, and that's an authentic thing because that's who you are, and that's you're never going to be able to like be free of some sort of physical identity as long as you're a human being. But it is really unfair to be like that has to come into your head before, and almost doing the work, which I feel like you do so well though. And I'm like, even with this show at the International African American Museum, it's like I feel like you're just tipping up on that. You know what I mean? Like you've done so much work like that. And like, I think we're going to see you expand beyond that. And it really can be potentially a choice if you, but it's on you to do all the work to like get that out of your head.
Yeah.
And so again, then we were back into, like you say, hitting a wall with that being so fucked up and unfair. And it's, I just am like, what could you do if you didn't have to necessarily lug all that around?
Yeah. Because like you said, that my identity is undeniable.
Right.
I mean, it's always going to seep into the work. It informs the work, obviously. But how much of that has to be present in the work? How often do I have to account for it or speak for it?
Yeah.
And I don't think I do. And I have no interest in doing that at the moment.
That's
I
awesome.
want to give myself, it is very liberating, and it should be, like going forward. And that's kind of the space I'm in now.
That's
so
fucking exciting.
Yeah,
honestly.
no, it is. And I want to remain excited about the work. I want to go into a project and be like, okay, I got to address this heavy-ass subject again.
Yeah.
And talk about what it is to be black in America, even if it is like celebratory. I mean, I don't always want to lead with that.
But that's a given, right? You know what I mean? Like that would be a given if people would let it be.
Right. Exactly.
And the people who are giving opportunities to artists, regardless of, like if they wouldn't put these parameters, that's what I mean. You go back to this kind of system where it's like, who's dictating what's coming out? And that's why I love when you say things like that, like stand up for your work, protect your work.
Right.
Don't make work based on a prompt someone is giving you or a signal, even if it's not like on its face, a signal.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
It's an unspoken signal.
Yeah, because I've even turned down exhibitions recently that were just like, when I read the curatorial statement, I was just like, I can't put my work in this context. I can't keep doing it. I mean, because I'm exploring so many other things, and they're being overshadowed by this one overarching topic, which is like my blackness first. And like, and I'm going to end up in a room in a gallery where they were only talking about my identity. And all these other elements are going to get lost. And then because I am invited, if I do commit to the exhibition, I'm going to want to honor that approach or that framework somewhat, but then I'm going to lose a lot of the things I was exploring before that didn't have to do with my race specifically. So, I mean, I'm just like, do I want to be a part of another exhibition that talks about like black trauma? No, I don't.
No.
Not at the moment. I live this shit every day.
Right.
So you gotta give yourself those moments in that freedom. And so also I kind of got myself into that kind of work over the past few years, wanting to tell specific stories. Like when I was talking about, housing inequities and police violence and stuff like that. But then people started getting accustomed to seeing that kind of work. And so I felt like it had to be a gradual shift and not so sudden. But I'm like, no, that's not necessarily true either. I can make a 180
Shock
tomorrow.
Yeah, you can fucking, but truly, this is something I think about when I see artists who like start getting attention. You're not in this conversation. I'm talking about other people, but I'm like, people who get like some success for something, and then it's like they almost are pigeonholed into that, or like feel like they cannot break out of that. And I'm like, that I understand the feeling and why that may come into your brain, but the answer is you can do whatever you want, and you don't have to do that. And I think what I always try to encourage Jeremy or whatever artist I'm talking to is like, don't don't even consider what they saw last from you. Like, do what you're excited about now and fuck it all, because it's like, that's a slow road to just being, like you're saying, burning out or not feeling like excited about the work, or feeling boxed in by the work or the idea of how people see you and see your work.
Yeah,
and
because
what
I'm
is
still
palatable.
developing as a person. I mean, as an artist, I
You're
I
so
don't want
young.
to pigeonhole myself right now, and I don't want to stick to a script. I don't want it to feel formulaic.
It doesn't. Your work doesn't to me.
Well, I'm like, at that
At
point,
all.
you might as well just hand it off to somebody else and let them churn it out.
That's right. You've established the business and you can just like say, here it is. But that's not what you're doing.
No. I don't enjoy that at all. I mean, no.
No, you would never do that. That's what I'm saying. I think when I look at your work and this specific exhibition, I was like, it does have a feeling of something different. There's even though there's callbacks and there's harkens to work that you've done before, themes, I'm like, it's unbelievably fresh and it feels modern and it feels like something that Charleston has never had from someone who is from here.
Right.
And it feels really exciting. If you're in the art community here and you see something like that, it almost is like, holy shit, we can all jump out of our boxes and we can do something that is different from what maybe you've seen before from this person. And why do we expect that? You know, it's always like, I feel like musicians are like, yeah, like their first album. And this is a horrible idea because you're like, I just spilled my water. You're like not giving any room for the artist to evolve as a person. They want to like see, and if you look at other artists, you know this, the art history, it's like the specific slice of work that they're famous for is like a real blip in their career most of the time. The ones that are really pushing.
Yeah, and also not even their best work.
That's right.
At time you're like, oh, I didn't know this existed.
Right.
I didn't know this was part of their portfolio. They were like incredibly prolific, but then why did the markets push that particular thing? I don't know. It just, maybe it came at the right time. It worked. It was a part of or in alignment with a particular historical moment. I mean, there are things that make that work important, but the artists that are most celebrated often have like, you know, those periods of art. I mean, they're that period, and they're shifting. I mean, they go from making hyper-realist work to incredibly abstract work. And I feel like that's what we're missing the self-portrait, and we're missing, you know, just those like sudden shifts and transitions that I feel like were more, I don't know. I don't want to make these generalizations. There are people doing incredible work, and I'm not like, I don't, you know, tune in to see what's, you know, happening now in the art world all the time. But there are incredible painters, sculptors, performance artists, that kind of thing. But I just want to be sure that I'm giving myself the freedom to kind of just respond in a way that I feel is true to that moment in the subject or the time, just the times in general. I just want my finger on the pulse. And you can jump into that, you can jump out of that, and you see what happens. I mean, it's just very unpredictable. I'm just working towards just being as free in this as possible. That's the ultimate goal.
Yes, that's it.
I don't know what that looks like.
I don't know either, but that's like kind of the fun part, because I'm like, that's what I'm most was like, I don't know. I look forward to the most is like you're saying, going and not knowing what you're going to see. That's like way more exciting to me than being like, oh yeah, then that leads us back to, honestly, and we'll wrap up because I'm like, I could just talk to you for hours, but that leads you back to maybe not having those critical conversations, constructively critical conversations of just being like, good job. It's like, maybe if we do ask more of it and be like, why are we sticking to this? Or why does that work? Because Jeremy keeps threatening. He's like, I'm just going to do something super non-typical from like, I don't want to do anything. He's like, after I finish this series, I don't want to do anything like I've been doing. Not because of any reason. It just doesn't feel, it doesn't feel exciting anymore. It doesn't feel right anymore. And I don't want people to, there's always going to be some response to that, because people are like, they become a fan of you, or they become a fan of your work rather, and they start to expect things from you. And then when it's not that, or if it's departure, they're like, well, I don't know, I don't like his stuff as much anymore, or her stuff anymore. And it's like, that's, you have to really tune that out.
Yeah, you do, because I mean,
if it's possible. It's hard.
It is hard, but I think it requires a lot from the viewer. It requires a new vocabulary. I mean, if you put you present a whole new lexicon of of imagery and vocabulary and whatever else it is. I mean,
then you can have a new conversation.
Yeah, you can have a new conversation, but a lot of people aren't ready to have those conversations, and they don't know how to have those conversations, and they think they should be prepared to have those conversations. I mean, you can't just like, artist puts work on the table, and then you can't assume that you're going to be prepared to jump in there too. I mean, that work takes some time. It needs some time.
Maybe that's the missing piece. Maybe people are just like putting it all on the artist and they're not taking any responsibility for their part that they play in it. You know what I mean? As a viewer, an appreciator, or somebody who likes art, it's like you also have a role to play in that, which is to be ready for something that you're not ready for.
Yeah, and I mean, there's just so many ways to experience work. I mean, if you just want to go enjoy something visually, I mean, for its visual, like aesthetic qualities, great. Maybe there's some like greater significance. Maybe there's some like social political statement being made that you're in alignment with. But yeah, no, I at least think my work requires people's participation. If they want to really get something out of it. I mean, if you don't, I mean, no sweat off my back. I mean,
right.
You know what I mean? But I feel like I'm just, to a degree, I mean, not to sound all corny and cliche, but like these are really just poems. I mean, that's all you can do is kind of craft your own poem.
Yeah, because otherwise, why are we even doing art? Why is art something that people are compelled to do?
Yeah, because I mean, it's still what was I going to say? Self-expression. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. I mean, in the simplest terms, I mean, that's what it is. I feel like people expect so much from artists. Like, I don't speak for a group of people. I can't speak for a group of people. I mean, I have similar experiences to, other people that look like me. But my experiences are certainly very unique and personal. And this is the way I express them. There's no other, I'm not you, you're not me. I can't, this is why my work looks the way it does.
Right. That's what makes it interesting.
Right. I grew up in North Charleston, Dorchester Road, went to art school, played baseball, played Dixie Youth. I mean, spent time in New York. Now I'm back. I made work, when Walter Scott was shot in the back. I made work when the Manual shooting happened. I made work when the Calhoun statue came down. All those things inform the work, but they don't have to be present in the work. I mean, I may even want to escape those things. And so maybe that's reflected in the work. So I think it is, and there's that, what's required of the viewers to know the context and to do that homework. Because there's so many things other than an artist making that work in that moment. It's much as nuance is a hot word right now, but it truly is. And when I studied artists, it wasn't even studying their work so much as it was studying the history of their lifetime, what happened in their lifetime, hearing about their personal relationships.
Right, that's the most interesting part.
Yeah, where they moved, when they struggled, who supported their work, who didn't, what was controversial. I mean, that's when I began to understand an artist's work. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. So I don't think a lot of either that information is absent or we haven't given artists the time to. Those stories, like everything's just so immediate. People want to know why the work is made, when it was made, how it was made, what it means. I'm like, the work that we're studying now that I, just even in college, I'm studying work that was like 50 years old, 200 years old. And there's like all of this like scholarship surrounding that work now. But I feel like we haven't given time. My work may be more significant in 50 years than it is right now. And so I think we're reflecting too quickly. Maybe that's contradicted what I've been saying this whole time. I don't know.
No. I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's not contradictory because I'm like that is the thing. It's like, especially, and this is a whole nother layer to being an artist now. But like with even with social media, like I noticed that people are like making work at like a speed that is insane. Mm-hmm. It's like there's a ton of pressure on immediacy and also relevance and also importance and also idea. Like,
right.
It becomes so crippling for the artist that they start to do something that is safer and more. And you're not getting these true. You're not seeing the artist in the work necessarily. I see cool work on Instagram all the time. I'm like, that looks great. That's a great looking painting. That looks like it's done well. That's fine. Right. But it's like, where is that person in the work?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't mean like how you are expressing like the feeling of being maybe boxed in by certain themes of race and what you have to carry in that way. But I mean like just the ability to like actually show yourself in the work. And maybe it does take time. And that doesn't mean that because your Instagram following hasn't grown that you're not progressing as an artist.
Right.
Like it's a real pressure cooker. I feel like that artists with the immediacy are in this time in life.
Yeah, no, we're gauging. Yeah, we're using things that I don't think really contribute to an artist development.
To measure their success.
Absolutely, 100%. But I try to.
But I feel like that's why you kind of are a mysterious character, because I feel like what you do is a really good job of like not kind of buying into it. You're very present in what's happening in the scene, and I really appreciate that, because I know so many artists look up to you and they want to see you around, and they want. But I don't feel like you get bogged down in like what's going on. You're not on the scene in that way,
right?
Which is cool, because that's sort of the job. Yeah. And that's the responsibility. It takes that to sort of get quiet and listen and be like, what am I excited about making? Instead of like, it's very easy to get caught up in the vortex of what people are making. Like you're saying in New York, it's like you see you see all the work and you're like. Yeah,
you got to remove yourself once in a while. I mean, like you said, you can get wrapped up in it. Like what's cool, what's hot, what's happening now. And like just the energy of it. It feels good. But you're like, is that me? Is that true to me? And I spent a lot of time on my own, like out of the fold. But I think it is necessary to create. I don't know if the word like purity is a bit, a little pretentious.
I know,
there, but
I know what you mean though. Like something that is uninterrupted.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I like that.
I was going to say unadulterated. Then I'm like, why are these all like sexual purity things? It is very chastity belt of you. No, it's nothing like that. It is just, I just see a lot of artists then feel like what happens when that goes away. So you can't really, you know what I mean? Because it can happen in a short cycle. It can be, you have like an incredible career and
well, no one wants to be left out.
Right.
I mean, like how long can I be absent? I mean, not visible. I'm like, and people are like, oh, I mean, you should be more active there. I mean, more people should see what you're doing. I'm like, yeah, and no, I don't give a shit, really.
Like, I mean, guess what? You can go to the museum and see what I'm doing.
Right.
That's what I feel. I'm like, I don't. You were so cool when we saw you at Herona's show. You were like, if you want, call me when you go, and I'll come down and we'll walk through the thing. And I was like, I felt like I was hanging out with you by being at the show,
Yeah.
And I wanted to experience that on my own. And
I was going to say, even, you experiencing that without me hovering. Like, how are we supposed to be experiencing this? He's looking at us.
That was Jeremy. I was like, let's call him. I think of that as like such a cool thing. I'm like, I would love to walk through the exhibition with the artists and hang out with you just in general. I never feel like I get enough time with you until today when I've captured you for 4 hours.
No, it's
but
fine.
I was like, let's call him. And Jeremy's like, I want to like walk through it on my own. And I was like, that's a cool, I was better for it because I really did feel like I could get a more like the energetic feeling of what you were expressing. Cause that comes through in things that aren't even like senses that we can name,
Right. And I probably ruined the experience for you too. I don't know. I'm just like, this is that. And I was thinking this, you're like, that's not as cool as what I thought you were thinking. So can you leave now?
You're really destroying my vision of you as a genius. But
right.
No.
That's why I say mysterious. I mean, that's where you just kind of let people believe the best things about you.
I don't know. I don't think so. Listening to you talk about art and just your philosophies, and it seems like it's such a cool, like the fundamentals that you have established through the way you came up into art, and I'm like the Cooper School. I'm like so fascinated by that because I'm like I really feel like that kind of start is gonna serve you for the rest of your career. It's going to be amazing. It's going to keep setting you apart because I'm like, that's just, I think a lot of people go to art school to learn how to do art, and that's not what you did.
No, definitely not.
You're like, they didn't even try to teach me. They wouldn't show me how to do
like,
anything.
no, I'm not teaching. You want to learn how to use that program, you can do that in your own time, but we're here to,
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was tough. It was a little frustrating. I mean, we were like pulling like all-nighters the second week of school. I'm like,
damn.
geez, this is going to be a long ride. Long ride. But it was worth every second. And the only thing I do regret about Cooper is not grabbing some of the work of some of my like classmates.
Oh, I bet.
I'm like, fuck.
This
shit is great right now. They're doing so good. I would love to have one of these on my wall. Yeah.
That's so cool. That's amazing.
I snagged a couple things, but then a photographer friend, I gifted one to an ex-girlfriend. I'm like, fuck, I should have kept that.
You're like, I blew it. I fucked that up.
Yeah, man. Hey, she has no regrets there, truly, but
no, it's been a pleasure talking to you about art, getting to know you a little bit more, because I feel like, I think the mystery is well deserved, because it's not for lack of substance. You are a very insightful and incredible person to talk to about art or anything.
I hope so.
Yeah, you are.
I'm glad. Thank you for the. Yeah, no, I'm glad we got to chat. I mean, just like that's the thing. I was like, where did we first meet at the Improv?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was doing a Rip City at Silver Hill.
Okay, yeah.
And then I met you at the tennis event, Shada, and I was like, that's Fletcher.
Yeah.
But I feel like everyone in the whole art community
Hilarious.
is like, there's Fletcher. And people
That is so funny.
Yeah,
I don't even. Sure, I'll take it, but I definitely
I'm
don't
telling
think
you.
of myself in that way. But I was like, when you invited me, I was like, I saw her in one of her truest forms.
Yes.
She's fucking awesome. I was like, this is gonna be chill. I could do this. I don't do this,
It's so
hopefully
fun.
I offered. I had something of
Oh my God.
substance to share and didn't just ramble.
The fact that we're still 3 hours later talking, I think it speaks for itself. You're the man. And it's been awesome to talk to you. It's incredible to experience your work and then to talk to you about your work. I can't recommend it enough. Please go see his exhibition at the International African American Museum. It's on display through December
3rd.
Okay.
Yeah, December 3rd.
So truly don't miss it. It's
and there's an artist talk October 11th.
October 11th.
So on my website, there's a link to
cool.
register. I don't know how many slots are left. Who knows what that looks like.
Oh my God.
But,
all right. I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah. So
Oh my God.
be a little more. Maybe I'll try not to. Maybe I'll try to cover some other things. We don't hear a second version of this.
No.
But who knows?
No, I feel like you talking about your work is endlessly fascinating. But congratulations on the opening. Congratulations on all the success. And I can't wait to see what's next for you.
Yeah,
Thank you for doing this show.
This is amazing. I loved it.
Dude,
Thank
you're
you.
the best.
Thank you.
On irait peut-être nulle part. Paraît que les ciels sont plus beaux. Un vol direct ou avec l'escale. Pour passer des nuits à Oslo. On enverrait des cartes postales. Je laisserai